indistinguishable. Why can't I say that on camera? Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about estrogen therapy and what it did for me, and what it could possibly do for you. But before we get there, we need to talk a little bit about our body development in the womb. Now, if I've read it once, I've read it a million times, usually in the comments on a transgender article, that you'll always be XX or XY, and because of that, you'll either always be male or female. You gyro, and back again. Now, comments like those usually come from a high school biology class level understanding of chromosomes. Like way back in the 9th grade, a biology teacher once told us boys are XY and girls are XX. First of all, that is demonstrably not true. And I'm not even talking about transgender people. Walking out there in public, amongst us, are women who are XY and men who are XX. And they didn't go through transition. They were born with one of many intersex conditions, and the doctor saw a vagina or a penis when they're born and said, hey, you have a boy, hey, you have a girl. Even though many times it has often been discovered that their chromosomes didn't match their sex assigned at birth. That is just true. Our sexes are not just a binary. It isn't just male, female, XXXY. Hell, there's even more than XX and XY out there to make things even more confusing. There's all kinds of other chromosomal states, XXY, XYY, XXYY. I'm willing to bet that a lot of you out there are not just XX and XY, and that's one of the reasons you're watching this channel. But it turns out what determines our body's sex is not our chromosomes, but hormones and how we react to them. So an individual who is XY will usually develop testes in the womb, and those testes make testosterone. Now, the majority of times an XY individual's body will react to that testosterone and will have a male-sexed body. The same thing happens with XX individuals and their reaction to estrogen to grow female-sexed bodies. But thanks to nature and its infinite variability, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes those bodies don't react to those hormones. In the case of XY individuals, which I know more about to be honest, they might have a condition like androgen insensitivity syndrome or partial androgen insensitivity syndrome, which means their body's flooded with testosterone and they don't grow a male-sexed body. They actually grow a female-sexed body. Now, what does this have to do with transgender people? Well, there's a working theory that at the point in development where our bodies become sexed male or female, or neither, I should point that out, that is also possible, happens at a different point at which our brains become sexed male or female. So they think what's possible is that our brains become locked to a gender identity that's different than the sex of our bodies. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but that would seem to imply to me that transgender people are just another form of intersex. I'm sure many of you know more about this than I do, and I'm also sure that this is a gross oversimplification, but that kind of makes sense to me. So what happened to me and a lot of other transgender people is that I was born with a male sex body, but a gender identity in my brain said there's something different. And it took me a long time to discover it. In fact, it took me until I was almost 40, which is a shame because it meant that when I started estrogen therapy, it didn't have as much of an impact on me as it would have if I had started earlier in life. I went through a male puberty, which means that at puberty, my body reacted to the sudden influx of more male hormones and started building a more masculine body. Although fortunately for me, it wasn't a tremendously masculine body. I'm not exactly sure why that happened. Maybe it's another diagnosable intersex condition, but all I know is that this is the way I came out. If you catch it early enough though, like with trans kids, you can actually have a puberty that aligns with your gender identity of your brain. I mean, yes, most trans girls will never develop a uterus and they'll never develop ovaries, which means they'll probably be infertile. But infertility is a problem with all transgender people. However, by arresting puberty with hormone blockers and then adding testosterone or estrogen later, depending on how that person identifies, the body will start to change based on a blueprint depending on the hormones you're given. If it's testosterone, your body's going to start using the male blueprint. If it's estrogen, your body's going to start using the female blueprint. For trans girls, that would mean developing breasts and an hourglass shape and female pitched voices. For trans guys, it means they'll start to bulk up and grow facial body hair and they won't develop breasts. And this is all without the benefit of any surgeries after the fact. Yes, if they choose to later on, if that is something they feel is right for them, they can get their bottom surgeries. But besides that, they're going to be pretty much indistinguishable from any other cisgender boy or girl. Of course, as I was saying before, I didn't have the benefit of that. I went through the male puberty. At that point, changes were much more limited, but they could still be pretty profound. One of the first changes I noticed was breast development. Now, I was pretty lucky in that I actually had small breasts even before transition, which is, you know, one of those things that's a mystery to me. But it does mean that I grew to a pretty nice size and shape without the benefit of any surgery. I also shrank a little bit and my shoe size got a little bit smaller. Now, how does that happen? Well, my bones are set and fused, so my bones didn't actually change shape. However, from what I've read, that soft connective tissue in between bones can shrink a little bit. Plus, as you get older, you tend to shrink a little bit as gravity works on all those soft connective tissues in your spine. But I'm sure estrogen had some effect. So I went from a little bit over 5'6" to a little bit under 5'5.5" inches. Sorry for those of you watching abroad, I have no idea what that is in meters. I'm sure you can do the conversion. I also noticed just a general sense of almost euphoria at the time, and not all of that was a placebo effect, or the joy of knowing that I was finally becoming what I always wanted to be. Well, how do I know that? The first day I took the estrogen pill, I felt, like I said, euphoric. It was almost felt like a high, a natural high. And it wore off pretty quickly. It actually wore off after 24 to 48 hours. But everything seemed to be running just more more smoothly in my head. I don't know why, but it felt like, I've described it, that my brain had been running on diesel fuel all this time, but it really needed just regular unleaded, and it was finally getting the right fuel. However, what I didn't expect was that feeling would return one other time, and it returned after my dosage was actually raised a month later. So the initial glow of, oh wow, I'm finally becoming who I want to be, as well as the excitement of taking that first pill, had worn off. So to get that snap of euphoria again for 24 hours was really surprising. Later on, I started noticing my hair thinning in different parts of my body, like on my chest and on my arms a bit, although I was never tremendously hairy. At the risk of sounding cliche, yeah, I did get a little more emotional. I did start to cry more at things I would see on television or read in the newspaper or news stories, which just seemed to have a deeper emotional impact on me than they used to. I probably cried more in that first year during my transition than I had in the previous 10 years of my old life. Another thing I noticed is that I started to lose some muscular strength. Estrogen will do that. It will start to deteriorate some of your muscles, and including in your face, which is where some of these facial changes came from. I think some people think I may have had facial feminization surgery or something along those lines, but I haven't. There's actually both fat and muscle in your face, and all that gets redistributed over time, and it can lead to some pretty big changes, as you can see. Every time I see myself on video, I notice these more prominent cheekbones, as well as these kind of hollows in my cheek that I didn't have even when I was young and on the cross-country team, and I was probably the thinnest I was in my entire life. Fat also redistributes on your body, going towards your hip and your butt and other womanly places, which has given me more of a womanly shape, although I gotta say that your hips don't expand. Your hip bones are usually fused sometime in your early 20s, and at that point, no matter how much estrogen you pump in there, your hips are not gonna expand like they do for other women in puberty. And my waist isn't particularly small either. I might be lucky to get it down to 29 inches one day, I'm hoping, something in the 20s. My waist to hip ratio will never be the ideal. Estrogen also did nothing for my facial hair. For that, I had to go through many sessions and thousands of dollars worth of facial hair removal. Man, did it hurt. Oh God. Believe it or not, I'd rather go through my bottom surgery 10 times over compared to sessions of laser and electrolysis on my face. Estrogen therapy also did nothing for my voice. My voice is not that much different than it was before, and I know that probably a long time of learning how to do this voice has changed it in some way, but a lot of what you hear is a result of the effort I've put into making this voice over years, as well as the natural advantage I had of a male voice that wasn't very masculine to begin with. So what does this mean for all you trans women out there? It means that you can expect a lot of the same changes I experienced. If you start before puberty, congratulations, you can end up looking probably like any other cisgender girl. If you have any sisters, look around, you're gonna end up looking very much like them. If you start a little later than that, don't fret about it. You can still have very profound changes. I mean, I certainly have. The catch is that what has been done is very difficult to undo. Some of it can be rearranged, but not all of it. And a lot of those changes that you'll experience are due to things called estrogen receptors in your body. It really doesn't matter how much estrogen you use. Listen to your doctor's advice. Throwing more estrogen at the issue is not going to mean more changes. As a friend of mine used to say, it just means you're going to give breast to the fishes, because you're going to urinate all of this out. You can't change the amount of estrogen receptors in your body and what your body is going to do with it when it finally gets estrogen. And estrogen can actually be a pretty dangerous thing. Do not self-medicate. Just because your friend is taking a certain dosage doesn't mean you should too. Your bodies are completely different. This is not something to play with. Anybody who's ever read a birth control pill package will see that it says there's danger of blood clots. You can kill yourself. And I know that it's expensive, but there are surgeries out there that can help us correct some of the things that have been already done to our bodies, or even just refine the changes we have experienced. Things like facial feminization surgery, breast augmentation, etc. Just remember that because you were born with that body doesn't mean you have to keep it. I mean, the cisgender world obviously feels that way, and I don't know why we should be any different. I mean, plastic surgery wasn't invented for us. On that note, like, share, and subscribe, and see you around the interwebs.